Okay, looks like we are now live to the world here. Training Cafe is opening up for business. Get things framed up here, and we'll get rolling here in just about 1 minute. If you're watching on the Training for Climbing YouTube channel, you can type a question on training, nutrition, injury, recovery, climbing performance, you name it, into the comments box, and I'll get to those questions in just a few minutes. Let's just wait just a touch more for folks to filter in here. It's possible you're watching on the Training for Climbing Facebook page or on Instagram. And if you're on Instagram and type in a comment, I won't see it. The software I'm using only is going to feed me here on my desktop the comments or questions that are typed into the YouTube comments interface, and I believe also the Facebook comments interface. So in any case, let's get rolling here. It's noon on Monday, September 15th. Welcome to the Training Cafe. You know, I've been doing these live streams, and I call them the Training Cafe because I really enjoy drinking coffee. And if you enjoy drinking coffee, then let's make this a ritual where we can join together. And I have historically done these every other Monday, starting back during the COVID days when we were locked up at home. This was kind of an outlet for me to stay in touch with my climbing friends around the world and answer training questions and get psyched for whenever we were going to get let loose at the end of the COVID quarantines. And now it's several years later, and I've done 70 or 80 of these, and I'm going to try to get back in the saddle and get into a groove of doing these every other Monday. So we could hopefully we'll meet again on September 30th, 2 weeks from today at noontime as well. And so if you are available at this time and enjoy the interaction and the talk of training and climbing performance, then make this a regular thing for you. Every episode, I generally have a topic of the day that I talk about for 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment. And then the second half of the Cafe live stream is a Q&A where you guys, the viewers, type in a comment and or a question, and I get to it. And right now I hear somebody knocking at the door, but I think we're going to try to ignore that for the time being. I'm here working at home today, so I'm going to just ignore the UPS guy or whoever it is at the door. Unless he knocks again and is persistent, then I'll have to go attend to him. So in any case, one thing we do at the cafe at the start is if you have a beverage, coffee, let's toast together. Climbers around the world unite. We are here at the Training Cafe. Let me get the door. Hang with me, friends. Okay, friends. Well, sorry about that. It was actually the FedEx guy at the door, and I'm glad I got it because it was actually my broken laptop coming back to me. That's pretty crucial to my whole operation here. So in any case, we will get started with today's topic of the day. And you know, for most folks, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, whether you're in the US or in Europe, this could potentially be your sun season coming up. September, October, November. For many folks here in the States and in Europe, it's some of the best climbing weather to be had. I know for myself, I'm heading down in October to the Red River Gorge, hopefully stay into November, and hopefully climb my best for the entire year. So getting set up for success is a process. And every year as a climber, hopefully you get better at that process, because, climbing performance is a complex thing. There's so many facets to it: physical, mental, technical, rest, recovery, nutrition, those final thoughts as you head up a route are as powerful as anything. And then of course, your ability to execute when you're up on the climb. And so there's a lot there that influences the final outcome, whether you clip the chains or top the boulder or not. And so I like to think of it using the well-worn analogy of an iceberg. An iceberg, you see the top of it sticking out of the water, doesn't look too significant, but of course, 90% of the iceberg is below water, and you can't really see it. And same thing applies to when you're trying to send your project. When you tie into the rope, come on. There we go. Okay. Hopefully you're all still with me. So back to my analogy, the tip of the iceberg is that 10% that you see and that you perceive on send day is having the most impact on whether you succeed on the route or not. But the other 90% of the iceberg underwater is everything you've done leading up to doing the climb. And I like to think of that iceberg as like starting 7 days before. So if you're a weekend warrior, as I have been most of my life, you're kind of living for the weekend, to get out Saturdays and Sundays and climb your best. Saturday, you're fresh. Sunday, you're a little tired. So like if you're going to send something hard, ideally it would be if you could, get a few good goes in on a Saturday. So leading up to that, the previous 5 to 7 days are very impactful in terms of, you can't cram your training in on Thursday afternoon or Thursday night and think it's going to help you on Saturday. In fact, it will fatigue you, training that late in the week. You can do a light workout, but nothing too rigorous. So there needs to be kind of a bit of a taper to your training, especially if you're coming out of a long training block, like a 10-week training block. You really need to have a taper at the end of that to allow your body to catch up from what has probably been, maybe a bit of an over training or overreach. If you've been training really, really hard, your body needs time to kind of, compensate, super compensate from that and, recover and get you back to really, truly being 100%. You don't want to arrive at your project and be less than 100%. And that often happens to people who train really hard during the week. And I do, but I train hard on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday, very light workout, and Friday, nothing really to speak of. So really think about not just what you're going to do on Sunday, but everything leading up to that. Of course, sleep is important. If you accumulate a sleep deficit during the week, you're just not going to be as sharp physically and mentally come, send day. Nutrition, you can't diet the last, you can't lose meaningful weight in that last week before you go to your project. So don't even try. Just try to hit your diet nail on the head in terms of, your calories you need for proper recovery and fueling, the protein you need to drive muscle protein synthesis and collagen synthesis, all of those things that make your body robust and resilient so that you can give your climbs the best go and not get tweaked or rapidly fatigued come the weekend. Your thoughts throughout the week, doing some visualization. If it's a project well that you've worked on previously, you should have a lot of beta in your head in terms of not only hold recognition and movement, sequencing, but also the feel of the moves. I'm a huge advocate. I coach. I've been coaching for decades. That beta is more than just knowing the holds and the order that you grab them. The most powerful beta is the feel beta. What it feels like to do the moves, the proprioception, what you feel through your hips, your legs, your arms, your shoulders, how you twist your body, all the little nuance, the body English that has nothing to do with the holds you grab. It's about where you position your body after you've grabbed the holds. And that is powerful information for being able to navigate a crux sequence in the most efficient manner, rather than thrashing through it in just kind of a neutral body position. If you're climbing steep rock, you don't do a lot of moves in a neutral body position. You're doing a lot of twisting and turning to draw your center of gravity into the wall and deload your hands and put as much weight on your feet as you can. So, that's all very route specific. And the more of that beta you can rehearse mentally to get wired into your brain, the better. And that's something you can do. And you really can't overtrain that, because you could, run through those mental movies several times a day in and day out, and really kind of ingrain the movement and the feeling of the moves almost into your subconscious mind, so that you have to spend, less time thinking about it on the route. The more of it you can turn over to your subconscious mind when you're executing, the better. Though there will be key things that you'll need to concentrate and really target your focus on when you're on the route. So again, I'm trying to get across the idea of that 90% of the iceberg below the water is all the stuff the week leading up to heading to the crag to work on your project. Let me see what else, and just kind of throughout the week, or maybe weeks, if you're training for several weeks leading up to a longer trip, which is kind of my scenario. I'm heading down around the beginning of October to the Red River Gorge, and I'll stay several weeks. So I'm at home, holed up in work mode and training mode, and trying to build anticipation and grow my motivation over a period of weeks. And, I have a couple of project routes in my mind, things that I've dabbled on before, one route that I've worked a lot on and not sent yet. And so I'm kind of getting mentally prepared and building my expectations, not in a way that I think it's going to be easy to send these routes. I know they're very challenging, at my limit kind of routes, and I'm going to have to put some time into them, and they're not going to be sent in the first day or two that I'm there. That's not the nature of climbing at your limit, typically. And so I'm kind of preparing for that battle, and getting my mind and body ready for it. And then I'm going to have to switch into a different mode. And maybe that is a different topic for a different training cafe, is when you get into kind of a long haul battle, how to stay mentally flexible and motivated and positive in the face of repeated failure. And that's what projecting is: repeated failure. Adam Andra, when he put up the world's hardest route, Silence, failed on that route for a few years, off and on, as he would keep coming back and come back better prepared physically and mentally to do better each time and kind of see the project through. And that's a different topic for a different day. So in any case, think of, the power of getting all those things right in the days leading up to your trip to your project route. And then on the day of, well, very important, that 10% still matters. And that 10% of the iceberg sticking out of the water is the things you do on the day of climbing and on the route itself. And so getting the optimal warm-up, having optimal nutrition. For most people, like a big weighty breakfast, like a stack of pancakes and eggs and bacon, is not a good pre-climb meal. A big breakfast burrito might not be a good pre-climb meal. Now, everybody's different, and you have to find out what works for you. But for many elite athletes, you're going to eat breakfast, you're going to eat some food, but it's going to be something not overly bulky, maybe some cooked oatmeal, maybe a couple of eggs. Some folks might just be a glass of protein and a good protein bar, not a sugar-laced energy bar or candy bar, but actually like a more quality, well-designed energy bar. And then, of course, eating a bit throughout the day. Again, not tons of food. You don't need to take a picnic basket to the crag. That's not necessary. When you're at the crag, there's a lot of downtime when you're standing around not burning many calories. You might only climb 10 or 20 minutes out of an hour, and the rest of the time you're standing around. So it's not like you're running a marathon where you need to be fueling yourself with gels and bananas and sandwiches and all these extra calories. Yes, you do want to get some protein and some carbohydrate into your bloodstream every few hours, and selecting the right foods to do that without giving you an insulin spike and then a crash, an energy crash, is important. And again, everybody's a little different, how sensitive they are to different foods. You need to find out what works best for you. Drinking enough water throughout the day is important, and for staying hydrated and physically resilient, reducing your risk of getting tweaked. When you step up to the route, kind of, those final thoughts, getting them right is so critical. What I do when I'm roping up at the base of the route, and it's natural to feel some butterflies when you're going up for a red point go. I try to channel like a grateful attitude. Yes, I have anticipation and I want to send, but you don't really want to be outcome oriented. You want to be letting go of that and preparing to take on the route one move at a time. So your mindset should be to execute the route one move at a time, let it evolve, and let clipping the chains, just kind of happen, rather than putting all this pressure on yourself, like it's got to happen now. This is it. I got to do it. That's generally not the best thought to have. It really puts a lot of pressure and some anxiety, and a lot of people respond to that with a shallow breathing and over gripping and things that kind of just get the snowball going that is going to hinder their performance. Whereas taking the pressure off you by saying, hey, I'm going to give it a few goes today, and maybe I'll send it, and if I don't, I'll come back more knowledgeable of the route and better prepared to send it the next time. And kind of that way you unload the pressure. And so when I'm tying into a route, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I actually verbalize out loud. If you ask my belayers, like without fail, my words that come out of my mouth as I'm grabbing the first holds is, let's have some fun. Because we climb for fun. It's about the process, the journey, the experience, being at the crag with your friends. We put a lot of time in training at home and at the gym to get those few hours a day or a weekend or a week at the crag on the rock. So it ought to be fun. It shouldn't feel like you're punching a clock and going to work. And so I want to ingrain that and really consciously embrace that. And I do that by saying, let's have some fun. I put a smile on my face as I'm starting up, the first few moves of the route. And then from then on, my self-talk is very in the moment, saying things like, if I'm getting tight, I say, relax. I'm kind of coaching myself with my self-talk. As I'm heading into the crux, I'll often say to myself out loud, execute. Because I know what to do. I've practiced the route. Now it's about executing. If there's that one hardest move, you might have some verbal cues or some of those beta feel that you're going to search for as you're setting up into the move, which is powerful code to kind of unlock the route and hopefully get through those hardest few moves. But staying mentally positive is so important. If you kind of botch a sequence, grab the wrong hold, sometimes you're done if you screw up a sequence. But sometimes you can kind of back out of it and correct things quickly. And so, being able to kind of get refocused, take a few deep breaths, gather yourself. If you can get to a rest or a shakeout, and take a few deep breaths and get yourself centered and let go of the mistake you made. Kind of like a quarterback, almost throwing an interception. It's like, wow, that was lucky. The guy dropped the ball and I put it right in his hands. And you got away with what should have been an interception, but it didn't happen. So you take a few deep breaths, you huddle up, you call the next play, and you go out and execute as if that last play didn't happen. You have to have a really short memory when it comes to, mistakes that you make on a route. And for that matter, if you don't send that day, you have to have kind of a short memory for your failures and focus on, at the end of the day, what you learned about the route, what you can do better and how you can execute. And oftentimes as you gain move memory and knowledge of the route, it's just a matter of climbing a little faster. If every go you're 1 or 2% faster, and then over the course of several goes or several days or weeks on the route, you're getting faster and faster and faster and more efficient. And eventually it's not that you came to the route stronger, but you came back to the route more knowledgeable, more efficient, and more able to send the route. So I think that pretty much covers it. Again, 90% of the pyramid, 90% of the foundation for that potential weekend send, that project send, is everything the prior 7 days leading up to arriving at the route. And then the last 10% is what you're actually doing when you get to the route in terms of warming up, executing, staying positive, and hopefully giving it a few good goes each day until you send the rig. Okay, so let's move on now to the question and answer session. I talked a little bit longer there than I wanted to, but it was a rich topic. So let me just see here. How do I minimize this? I'm using a little different streaming interface here today. So I just want to see what we got here. Okay. One question from Bo, do energy drinks during a climbing session hurt performance? Well, there's a wide range of energy drinks that people consume. It could be anything from a Red Bull, which is quite popular, and Red Bull comes in, I believe, a sugar-free and a sugar-filled version. I'm not a Red Bull drinker, but I would, for most climbers, the sugar-filled version would be the wrong thing. Because climbing is a stop-and-go sport where we have a lot of downtime, if you consume something that gives you a spike of sugar, and that would include Gatorade and all these other sugary sports drinks. In a stop-and-go sport, you get that spike of sugar into your system. If you are not utilizing that blood glucose immediately for exercise, your body kicks in insulin to shuttle that spike of sugar out of your blood into muscle cells or into fat storage if your glycogen supplies are filled. And when the insulin responds in that way and your blood sugar drops, you get sleepy, yawny, you feel weak, unfocused, and you kind of want to take a nap, not go send your project. Now, if you're riding a bike for 2 hours or running a marathon or playing a football game, which is stop and go, but it's a lot of stop and go over the course of 4 hours, maybe that Gatorade is helpful. And it probably is in the case of those aerobic activities that are very sustained, because you're going to be able to actually utilize that sugar bolus into your bloodstream right away for fuel. But for climbers, be careful. And so drinks that have a lot of sugar are, for most people, best avoided. for sport climbing and bouldering because of all the downtime between goes. I'd rather eat things, solid foods during the course of the day that give you a bit more of a slow release into your stream and will have less of an insulin response. And just, getting back to the whole sports drink question, which is what Bo asked me, there are drinks out there that won't give you a sugar spike, and some that have functional aspects to them, like, a cup of coffee. The caffeine can be beneficial as long as it doesn't make you jittery. Again, that's a very personal, individual thing, how you are affected by caffeine. There are sports drinks like, Fizzy Vantage. We make a product called Syndurex, which has no sugar in it. It's got functional ingredients, beetroot extract and citrulline malate, which are powerful vasodilators that open up your capillaries, help enhance blood flow and oxygen transport, and therefore really support a strong aerobic energy system, which is super valuable for route climbers. It will increase and improve your power endurance in your recovery. And even for boulders, it can be quite helpful. So don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but again, foods that generally will provide energy and protein and maybe some functional effects without a lot of sugar, anything that it says high fructose corn syrup on it, those are generally not healthy alternatives, and they're generally not the best energy substrates for rock climbers. Another comment here: too much caffeine makes my fingers super sweaty. Coffee 1 hour before a climb has been great, but I personally avoid climbing well in a caffeine rush. Yeah, everybody's different. I'm a caffeine drinker, and I assume I'm a pretty fast metabolizer of caffeine because I drink a lot of it over the course of a morning and midday. But when I'm climbing, I actually drink less coffee than I do when I'm at home working, because I do kind of feel fluttery in my chest and just a little anxious, a bit of a effect that is negative for me. I know some climbers, Jonathan Segrist consumes no caffeine because it just affects him. He may be a slow metabolizer, so just even a small amount of caffeine makes him jittery and just not feel good for climbing hard. So yeah, you need to find out what is the right amount and the right timing for you. Another comment here: for post-workout recovery, do you recommend some high glycemic carbs in addition to protein? Yes. So, if you are going to consume more sugary things that release into the bloodstream quickly, high, that kind of elicit more of a spike of blood glucose, the one time that can actually be beneficial for climbers would be at the end of your session. If you've put in a long workout, maybe you're in the gym for 3 or 4 hours, bouldering, training, lifting, climbing, or maybe out at the crag all day long with just some snacks along the way. And if you're planning to climb the very next day, it's very important to begin what is called, glycogen repletion or resynthesis of glycogen in the muscle cells. That's the stored sugar in the cells. And so after a long workout or a long day of climbing, your muscle glycogen and your liver glycogen as well is likely largely depleted. So more high glycemic index food, like if you're going to eat a candy bar, a good time to do it would be right after your workout, or a sugary energy bar would be right after your workout, or when you're hiking out from your day of climbing, maybe to get a shot of some calories into your system post, just on your way to dinner. I will often eat an energy bar that has some carbs and some protein on my way out of the crag to get that refueling started. For runners and bikers, if you run a marathon, those folks burn 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. It's so much more important for them to really blast those calories into the system after their workout. For climbers, you may only burn 2,500 calories a day, or maybe 3,000 calories a day if you're a boulder or sport climber. And so if you blast, 500 calories in the form of a beverage, a sugar-filled beverage, right after your workout, and then eat dinner, you may end up with a calorie surplus for the day. And that's how you gain weight. Adipose tissue, in terms of fat, that is not, the smartest thing to do. Okay. Okay, Anna asked, what about a piece or two of candy right before this end? That works for some people. I have a couple of climbing friends who, take a few gummies into their mouth or a few Skittles into their mouth. Doesn't work for me, but for some folks, right before, like literally 5 minutes before, I don't know that it's actually going to really help you because it's not an instantaneous thing in terms of, it has to go into your stomach and be digested a little bit. And then, you know, sugar needs to move into the bloodstream and circulate to the muscles. So it might be 10, 15, 20 minutes for that to happen. So it you know, is debatable whether that's super beneficial or not, but you need to find what works for you. Now, I do know big wall climbers. Now, big wall climbers are a different breed because they're up on a wall all day, maybe a 12, 18-hour day of climbing. And so they are burning maybe 3, 4, 5,000 calories a day. And so they need to steadily feed. And I know pro climbers who are big wall, experts, and they will eat anything. They'll eat peanut butter, chocolate chips, potato chips, some relatively unhealthy foods, but they're burning so many calories that it's they just need to increase their calorie total throughout the day however they can get it. And even if it's not the most healthy foods, it might be psychologically beneficial to them to have some snacks like that, some pleasure snacks, when they take a break from climbing. So yeah, be careful with those sugary, sweets and candies that tend to have a lot of corn syrup and things. But a piece or two is so insignificant that I think that if you think it helps, then it helps. Next question. I've always been training my finger strength on a hangboard, but recently I found that the no-hang devices are more convenient for me. Do you think one is better than the other performance-wise? Yeah, so he's talking about traditional hangboard training, hanging off an edge versus, the no-hang lifting with one or two hands. So you could use a force device like the Pitch 6 force board, where you're pulling with two hands equally, or you could be lifting with a loading pin and a tension block or lattice edge or something like that. One hand, kind of a lift off the ground in a deadlifting type position. And I think a lot of people who have done many months or years of hangboard training, they've gotten as much as they're going to get out of it. Not that they can't still benefit, but it's slow gains. And one of the axioms of training is that you introduce a novel training stimulus, a new exercise, a new protocol. It's something your body's not done before, and so it is prone to adapt to something new, as opposed to something tired that you've done just repeated for many months or years. And so you go to the no-hang devices, and it is something novel. It takes a few sessions to kind of understand how it all works in terms of, how long the strap should be and what position your body should be in to safely do it and effectively do it before you can really try to max out on it. I've, in recent months, dabbled in that no-hang training. I love hangboarding. It's part of my warm-up protocol, and so I do a lot of hangboarding. But I have introduced into my max finger training routine some of the no-hang devices, and I think it's very beneficial. So not that one is better than the other. I think probably someone who's serious about training should develop a program where they do both. Maybe in the same workout, a little bit of each kind of dovetail together in a smart way, or maybe it's something you cycle back and forth between. It's, really beyond the scope of a discussion like this to tell you what to do, but it would be really based on your training history and, kind of where you're at. But I think there's value in both forms. And so I'm not going to dismiss one or the other. I think most serious climbers who are training for finger strength should be using some of each technique. Question about citrulline malate versus beta-alanine. Which is better? Well, they're two totally different substances that have two totally different effects on the body. The beetroot extract and the citrulline malate that I mentioned, which is in the PhysiVantage Endurex or Sendurex product, it is something that enhances the aerobic energy system by increasing blood flow. There's also some research showing it makes the mitochondria, which are the ATP factories in our muscles, operate more efficiently. And the more ATP you can generate via the aerobic energy system, the more you conserve that finite anaerobic reserve, which is what you tap into for the hardest moves and hardest sequences of a route. So as a climber, you always want to be doing as much of the work as you can aerobically and save that finite anaerobic system, which is where you pump out and fail. You want to save that for higher on the route or for the hardest moves of a route or boulder. And so that's what Sendurex allows you to do. It really potentiates the aerobic energy system. Beta-alanine, however, has no acute effects like that. Doing a dose of beta-alanine into your sports drink before a workout or a crag visit has zero effect. And that's why it's kind of a joke that they put it into pre-workouts. It will make you tingly. It has that effect called paresthesia. It's just a benign tingling in your fingers and toes and maybe your face or skin elsewhere. And that's why a lot of companies put it into their pre-workouts, is that you feel that tingliness and you're like, ooh, it's working. But in terms of influencing your performance, your training in a beneficial way, the beta-alanine has no acute effects. It actually has to be accumulated inside the cell over the prior 4 weeks. So it's something you have to take every single day. The beetroot extract and the citrulline malate have an acute effect. You take it on the day of, right before you work out, right before you climb, and you get a nice 4-hour arc of effect from it. The beta-alanine, you take a minimum of 3 grams a day, as much as 6 or 8 grams a day, and you do that for a whole month. Kind of like how people load creatine phosphate, creatine monohydrate. The beta-alanine, what it specifically does is it acts as an intercellular buffer. So it has no effect on the aerobic energy system. It's purely, its effect is purely on the anaerobic system. When you go anaerobic and you're burning muscle glycogen in the absence of oxygen, which is what happens on the hardest moves of an exercise or climb or boulder, that's when you get pumped. And the pump is a result of hypoxia. There's hydrogen ions being released that lowers the pH inside the cell and eventually gives a signal to your brain to stop exercise because homeostasis is being lost. And that's what the beta-alanine does, as it accumulates inside the cell over the course of taking it every day for a month or longer, it acts as an intercellular buffer. So those hydrogen ions that are the result of glycogen being split to make ATP anaerobically, those hydrogen ions will initially be buffered by that beta-alanine that you consume that is stored inside of the cell. So it's a buffer inside the cell. Just like you could take baking soda and it would act as a buffer outside of the cell. It's a blood buffer, taking baking soda. And that is actually helpful as well. It has, by the way, an acute effect. It's not something you take daily, but you would take baking soda acutely before you exercise. The problem with baking soda is it makes you sick in the stomach and you end up, if you're not careful, shitting your pants. And so it's really not the best supplement for most athletes. But the beta-alanine has no bad side to it. But on the plus side, you need to take it every single day in a significant dose for it to accumulate and have any effect. So I am, by the way, a beta-alanine user, and I take it every single day. But it's not something that has an acute effect. So taking it before your workout will have, or before your climb will not enhance performance at all, but it will make your skin itchy. or tingly. Okay, Coach, do you have any tips to improve breathing during climbing? It's hard to get that dialed in. I appreciate some ideas on how to work on that. Yeah, breathing's huge. And breathing for a climber is different than breathing for, say, a runner or a biker, where you can, if you go out for a run, you can get into this very rhythmic breathing. It tends to be most effective when you're running to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose if you're at a casual pace, or if you're at a harder pace, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And in climbing, the same thing is true. But the thing is, with hard movements, when you do a hard move, a very tensioning move, we hold our breath, the Valsalva maneuver. Just like, when you do a hard bench press, you fill your lungs, and then you let the breath out as you are finishing the bench press. And then every lift, you're having this breath hold. Well, doing hard climbing movements involves some breath holds. And that breaks up that steady breathing compared to, again, to the runner, where you're just breathing steadily. You're never doing a breath hold. And, so in climbing, the breath holds are part of the game, but a lot of people carry that breath hold over longer than they need to. They hold their breath for a hard move, and then they get a good hold and another good hold, and they're still holding their breath. Whereas what you should do is hold your breath for the hard move, but then immediately kick back into regular breathing. So that kind of legacy breath hold for a longer period of time than necessary, again, kicks you into this, deoxygenation, this hypoxia that is harmful to performance. And in terms of actionable things to do, I think every time you stop to chalk up, let's say, or shake out on a route, you should, assuming you're at a decent rest, good holds or a good stance or, good body position or knee bar or whatever, pause and direct your thoughts inward to your breathing and consciously kind of get back to slow, steep belly breaths. Again, you came out of a hard section of climbing or a hard, few moves on a boulder. You may have held your breath, and then after you let go of the breath hold, you might be panting a little bit. So you get to a rest position, you want to normalize your breathing. And that is best to kind of just get back to slow, deep belly breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Try to, slow down your breathing to 1 or 2 breaths every 10 seconds. Those slow, steep breaths, have a parasympathetic response in terms of calming you down, lowering your heart rate, getting you kind of back to center. And then you can cast into the next section of the route. And so being more mentally engaged in the process. Now, when you're going through the crux sequences, you have to be thinking about the moves, not thinking about your breathing. So you think about your breathing when you don't have to think about your moves. And that's generally when you're on a rest position or on really easy climbing. Then you can kind of shift your focus more to your breathing and focus on slowing it down and having those slow, deep belly breaths. Another question here, Sergio. Any tips? Oh, I guess I just answered that. But I did have a question here that came in on, I saw just before the live stream went on from Rob Brock. He's competing at the 24 Hours of Horseshoe Hell, which I think is next week. And he's asking for tips in terms of nutrition. And it sounds like he's a PhysiVantage user because he specifically asked about use of our supercharged collagen and our Sundurex pre-workout performance drink. How would you use those to help you perform your best on the 24 Hours of Horseshoe Hell, where you're literally climbing dozens and dozens and dozens of routes over the course of 24 hours? And I guess the first thing I would say is forget about supplements, is just eat and drink a lot. Really think about what foods you can throw into your pack and have. Now, you're going to burn more than 2,000 or 3,000 calories, obviously, if you're climbing for 24 hours straight. You're probably going to burn 6, who knows, maybe 8,000 calories. So you need to have a lot of calorie dense foods. So things like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and obviously some fruit could be really good. Some energy bars with protein would be really good. You are going to be severely catabolic. You do anything for 24 hours, you're going to be breaking down a lot of muscle protein. And if you're not sleeping, you're not rebuilding anything. So to provide your body frequent doses of protein and carbohydrate and some healthy fats. You should not be avoiding fats. Fats are great fuel for long duration, kind of ultra endurance exercise. While the high fat diets that have been proposed out there, where you just ketogenic diets where you avoid carbs altogether, they can be pretty good diets for ultra marathoners, people that are doing activities that are virtually 100% aerobic in nature, that can be fueled by fatty acids. But climbing, you're doing hard movements. You're doing a lot of anaerobic movements when you're climbing at your limit. And the fuel for anaerobic movements is carbohydrate. So we need carbohydrate in our diets. You don't want to be on a ketogenic diet as a climber, as a rule of thumb. Though there could be health benefits to it, it's not the ideal thing for performance. So in any case, think about bringing as much food and water as you can to eat regular doses every 3 or 4 hours throughout the 24-hour period. And then in terms of the PhysiVantage products, the supercharged collagen is always good to consume pre-workout, pre-loading. In terms of going at it for 24 hours straight, maybe you do 1 or 2 scoops in the morning, and then 12 hours later, 1 or 2 scoops again to get this collagen-specific amino acids into the bloodstream so that they can be utilized by the connective tissues as you load them. That's the proven protocol from the various research studies. And in terms of the Sendurix, as I mentioned earlier, it has about a 4-hour arc to its effects in terms of the vasodilation and supporting blood flow and oxygen kinetics. And so that is something you could do a scoop every 4 hours into your water bottle throughout the event to keep you at kind of a clinically effective level of the beetroot extract and the citrulline malate. And that could be a real difference maker for such a long duration event. And most important is you don't want to get injured. A lot of people go into those events. I know a young lady who was in the horseshoe hell a year or 2 ago and ended up with a shoulder injury just because of so much climbing in a fatigued state. And, climbing in a fatigued state is when injuries happen. So as you fatigue, you need to dial back the difficulty of your routes appropriately. If you're trying, at 20 hours into this thing to be climbing near your limit, you are at high risk of injury. So, do those types of routes in the first 6 hours of the event, and then you're going to really need to dial things back and make it very submaximal, especially the last 12 hours of the event. You don't want to get injured. Okay, well, listen, we've been going here for over 45 minutes, and I think I've cycled through all the questions that have been typed in up to this point. Again, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Training Cafe. I'm going to try my best to get back into the groove of doing these every other Monday, so you can kind of mark your calendar. We do them at noon Eastern time. If you miss it, you can view it after words. The video is housed on YouTube, and so you can find it there. But if you want to ask a question, of course, and if you want to sip coffee with your climbing friends around the world, then you need to be here live to do it. So again, mark it on your calendar, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And if any of you are traveling to the Red River Gorge this fall, perhaps I'll see you there. Don't hesitate to say hi if you see me. Love to shake your hand and get to meet you. And otherwise, we'll see you here at the Training Cafe again in a couple of weeks. Spread the word. If you know a friend or have somebody that wants to, is getting into training for climbing, or is passionate about training for climbing or nutrition, or someone that's getting tweaked and injured, have them join us in 2 weeks, and I'll try to give them some free advice. Of course, if you haven't already, I do a Training for Climbing podcast once or twice a month. So if you can go to Apple podcasts. Search Eric Hörst Training for Climbing. You'll find my podcast. That's a good one to subscribe to and listen to for some really content-heavy information. I kind of put on my professor's hat for some of the episodes and get really down into the weeds, into the sports science, bioenergetics of training and climbing. And then other ones are more superficial, like crag tips, like kind of what we did here today. There's value in both formats, and you'll find both in the 100+ episodes of the Training for Climbing podcast. And of course, my website, trainingforclimbing.com, is a great resource. There's hundreds of articles in an archive there. You can go into the search bar, type in a topic or a keyword, and you'll get served up a variety of articles that might have some clues for you to take your climbing and or your training to the next level. Okay, so I guess it's time to sign off. Thanks again for joining me. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.